This is in an archaeological site known as the Hilly Archaeological Site now, or Hilly Archaeological Park. And this is called the Hilly Grand Tomb. It's in Abu Dhabi, and it's dated now to 4,400 years ago. I want to tell you a story before we get into looking at this, while you look at this incredible architecture here in cyclopean building here and notice that it's rounded as they built it. I had a friend growing up and got to look at this, but it was on a 16 millimeter video camera that his dad had just gotten. You see, his dad was a fire control for big oil rigs, and he had to go quite often to Saudi Arabia, and he ended up going to Desert Storm and stuff after that, but hell, he was retirement age by far by then. But he wanted to show us something one day whenever I came over before Jimmy and I left, and it ended up being footage of being out in some deserty area and parts of a wall and some ruins, because he asked them to show him some ruins that people don't know anything about or whatever, because he's going to film it with his new camera and try it out. And it wasn't what he was really trying to show us, but he ends up coming to this park here, and to be honest with you, he had 5 to 8 minutes, as I remember something. But if he spent a minute with his hands not shaking around or walking so it's bobbling around like crazy, then that would have been good out of the whole thing, the way I remember it. And he panned around a few times, and there was these guard type guys that were there that had guns and stuff, and said, no, so they have this place guarded? And he goes, no, that's for us. They're ex-Green Berets, now they got a cush job, and they watched them out. So they rode around in trucks, and it made it look like some kind of CIA type thing, but actually they were just people that with the government were putting out oil fires and stuff. So he went through and showed some little pictures of this around, and we're going to take a look at this in a minute. This is a whole lot better footage. It wasn't 740p. Again, it was 16 millimeter. And when we saw it, by the way, we had to go and take and film it across into the dining room wall. The living room wall was paneling, so this probably dates it. This is back in the 80s. And so across into the dining room wall, and he had to take some pictures off the wall and stuff, and then bam. And so he didn't have a pull-down projector or anything, but he had a projector. So if you remember projectors in the classrooms when you were a kid, this was probably not as good as that. It had sound, but what he really liked to do apparently was thought he was taking pictures of things, because he would film 10-15 seconds and then cut it off and then back. And if you ever watched any of these old things back, it always went vert, vert, yeah, every one of them. And so again, if he spent a minute straight looking across things, I mean, I remember one thing where and then he's just panning, and then and then he's so it's just, and then walking, so it's just jiggly as hell. And he told us that these people said that this right here was some ancient king from way back when. And he asked him how old, and they said, the Queen of Sheba out of the Bible. And he goes, yeah. And he goes, way the hell before that. That's what he said. And he asked him if it was if their people had built it or whatever, something had gotten to that point, and they told him that, or they told him that this is way before we didn't build this. And there's like stories about, and he said that they told him a big line of bullshit about So anyhow, then it clips from that real quick, and then there's some good footage because nobody's holding a camera. It's actually set up in a truck looking through the window, and you're about 120 yards away, he told us, from this great oil fire that's there. And they actually show, that's what he got the camera for, is to film it and then show him putting the thing out and showing this technique, especially if it worked, because like he's the third crew to try it, and the second one actually screwed things up to where it was going to be even harder to put this thing out than it would have normally, because of the way they had screwed it up. And a lot of times they push up mounds around it and they try to blow it up and do things like that. And so he was going to try to do another variation of that. But what they did was they pushed up the tractors and mounds and had a spray rig that they could get going off another truck and run up to them that was hooked up to it. And so it sprayed water on across. And they were setting up some kind of shield thing. And what they had all done other than that too was take a drill and have it come at it at an angle, and like 50, 60 foot below the ground and at an angle, but not quite penetrating it. And they did one, and one was like going to be a vent, but it was pre-capped off, and it did this and that, and the other one, and they had another one that they put in, and they're going to do nitroglycerin or something and try to do a cap off right above the other one, and it's going to blow it off, and then now the vent's going to be here, and it's going to blow up all the ground, and because it's going to try to seal it off, and the sand will hopefully do all that. Anyhow, he says all this yada yada, and the video keeps just going here for, I don't know, 5, 6, 8 minutes, and he's talking to us about all kinds of stuff. And then it gets to a point, he goes, here we go, and then you get to realize how small he is. I mean, this thing is just a huge, giant volcano of fire that's around him. And there's a couple in the distance, too, that are smaller looking, but also they're way in the distance. This thing is huge. And again, he said, I said, like, you know, how close are y'all? And he goes, about 120 yards. But where they were at was like 20 foot away from it. And they did this thing where they pull up with the tractors and do that deal and get it all set. And then he said, well, here we go, because he can see. And he goes, okay, that's me. And they all start running back away from it. And they're wearing that silver garb like you see people go and try to mess with magma at a volcano and shit, right? And they get just about out of frame. Whenever they do, all of a sudden that spray rig stops. And he goes, okay, it's about 6 seconds, and we sit there waiting for it, and all of a sudden, ha-boom, and you can see the thing in the ground. And what happens, and he tried to explain it to us afterwards, is they did an explosion above ground, and it was something that robs the air of oxygen, so it was going to help to try to cut off the wick while they blew up above it and tried to seal it off, separating a secondary vent that could be valved, and, you know, all of it at the same time, simultaneous, blah, 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 and they pulled it off. And then you could see him running back and this other guy, and they took the tractor things and they pushed up and tried to put mounds to it, and then they're going to take and have to valve it off and stuff, and they're just praying it doesn't reignite real quick off of it. But, you know, it seemed pretty exciting. And this guy had to be taken out. I remember before Jimmy telling me this, so they had somebody come and get him in the middle of the night. Like, they called him up, and he said, okay, well, da da da, and I'll be there in about, he goes, no, I got somebody to be there in about 5 minutes. He's already on the way. You know, like, what? So they had somebody, they picked him up, hauling ass, went to a local airstrip where they already had a helicopter there, picked him up, took a helicopter to Carswell Air Force Base, got on an airplane from there, and then boom, he's on his way to, you know, Saudi Arabia, Abqaiq, places like this, sometimes to put out these oil fires. And anyhow, so it's neat to revisit this place and actually find out what its connectives are and non-connectives are. And looking at this is that cyclopean rockwork that we can find, that you can see examples of variations on the theme. I mean, in Peru, but all across the Middle East here and stuff in ancient times. And this is supposed to be hooked up with a older culture that maybe we would connect with the Sabaeans, which has got to do with Queen of Sheba too, but it's proto to that situation being 2400 BC. I don't know if you've been looking around or not, but over here there's a hole right here in the corner here that's perfectly drilled off through the rock, and on the ground over there, but you can't see it, slightly out of the way, is a plug that goes into it. And there's also this one that's been done right here. Now on the other side there's another thing that almost looks like those dolmen doors that we've been looking at when we look at dolmens. But this is that weird, almost in-between cyclopean thing, and it's that concept of where you realize that they went out of their way to make this look difficult and freaky, because there's no reason to have done it in any way that they are doing it. Just baffling. Like, just as an example, wow, you pick this rock right here and you say, okay, so they made that one real good and they're starting to stack other ones off of it, but yet you find this one is accommodating to this rock. And over here, they didn't even make it flat and they accommodate to it for that rock. But apparently this one's real huge, so maybe they did this one to go to that one, but then what the hell's going on here? And that impinges on this rock. Now here's the idea. They, in this concept, where a lot of times it doesn't show it totally, they're trying to get back to flat. Although they don't do it totally here, you can see that it jogs up and it does different things, right? But it doesn't quite go to flat. But yet on the top, and you can see this rim, it's going flat. So they have the ability and they know and the want to do it. It doesn't just end up like jaggedy as hell at the top. No, and on purpose, this rock is not the right size to go along with that, but it goes along with these. So it just almost makes no sense in the way that they make these and cut them all out. And just take, for example, Utah here, that's cut out and it's conjective. I mean, if they're willing to put a little rock in there, that's, you can tell it's a different rock than the one that's around it. Why don't they just put a little rock in there and then make a square? And if they're willing to make it flat here and flat here, why don't they just make it the same size? Why are they making off? And why we got reverse Utah again over here? And worse, or even greater, really, than all of that, is the fact that as this is being built, it's not just a flat wall, but it's curved and going around, and that each one of these, even though they're built to be perfect on themselves and lock in and everything, lock up, lock like they do, it's curved and it goes around, and each piece is curved slightly. And there are places you can see where it looks like this one's diving a hair too much, but that comes and it's going out a hair too much, but yet it goes around, and yet still, and it's carried around and it's curving. Other places it's almost perfect in sheen. And there's this craftsmanship that makes you think, well, did they put it together and it was all jumbly rocks kind of on the outside too, and then they smoothed all those down to this point we're looking at here? How? And people try to say that they re-put up this rock here and it didn't quite fit, and then put it back down and then to put it back up. The thing weighs 8 tons. You're not just willy-nilly putting this up and down. About the third time you try that on these people, they're going to balk on you and put you, you're going to be banished from the tribe and get the hell out of here if you can't get your cuts right. I mean, it's something that's not going to be accepted. Let's start to look at this as we pan across it here. But more importantly, here again we can see multiple cut rocks, and I guess the one that really is key point, and the one that they made key point, is the door, and it looks like a dolmen here. But there's certain iconography that goes on with it, and I don't know if you can make it out, and it's really worn away over time and not really well engraved, and it's bas relief too. So it's sticking out over the rock. So this is that idea that these rocks were bigger than this and somebody smoothed it off. There's even a knob right there, and there's another one somewhere here, or might have been on the other picture, another one to come. Oh, there's one right here. But the number of cuts that it takes to make this rock. And let's say somebody took and made that rock. What you would think is that must be the leftover piece of plywood you hacked a whole bunch of pieces out of. Why would you make that the standard for anything? But this is what they built off of. And there's a straight cut coming up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and that jag down at the end looks like 21 cuts and a hole going through it. I mean, I just don't understand. We talk about the 12 or 13 angled stone and the Peruvians, where they've got this same old concept going on. We've also seen this in the Etruscans, but of course a couple of these rocks here are like, what? And this is one of them. Imagine just the amount of rocks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, that have to be all fitting on to make that to fit. And then from there on, there's all that screwed up rock work that all tries to make it back to straight but doesn't quite. Yet the top is perfectly straight on that, so no matter what goes on level 2, level 3 is all made to make that all just right. It's over 40 foot across this thing and 18 foot tall. Iconography down below this looks like a person holding a goat on the left-hand side. Well, on the left-hand side looks like a person. On the right-hand side is a goat-type creature with its tail up. It almost looks like a dog, or it looks like a bull. It's got too big of a tail and curly, but that's just kind of symbolic. And then up here you can see some other artwork, and we'll take a closer look at that here in just a second. But you can see this arch and the way that it is built there. Now, you have to kind of catch it with some shadows to really get a good effect look like this shows right here. And so above, the ones we were looking where we were, right there, above the hole, not below, it shows this. And what we're really seeing here is the sign of Aquarius and pouring out water pitchers, it seems to me. It's what I get off of it. It looks like an inky type thing, Aquarius. Just a man standing here, yet he's holding a spear and something else in his hand. Doesn't appear to be completed, so it's not like a master of beasts or that godhead idea holding it. And then, of course, over here is Meepsor from the planet Zinthar, the Ant-Man alien half-bull hybrid that's teaching them how to build the rock stone thing that they built here. Or at least that's what you'd get off the Alien channel. But you could maybe get a lot out of this. This could be some idea of Scorpio. This thing that looks like it has way too many legs is really a tail here on the back, yet it shows what it looks like 2 arms going up and 2 arms going down. So he's got extra arms, or what's going on here? Is this a double symbol of praise? Now again, this is on a tomb, so people can't quite get the idea of it, but if you have Aquarius next to the man and this concept of rebirth that we've talked about in so many religions going with that concept, and Aquarius being the man symbol that goes here, that kind of goes with it a little bit. And again, that stone is the one that's cut just all crazy here. And you can even see right here how they've actually had that come and point out to fit in between these two off here, which is this giant stone that's next to it. So it's a lot of stoneworking. And again, this whole thing's bas relief. This is like the Sumerians, where they took a rock, and no matter how good that surface was, they've taken it down, you know, it at least that much, and left parts of it, and that's the artwork, and the rest of it they made smooth and made it look like it never happened. So it just grew out of the rock. A lot of people just phase right past that like it's just But this looks a lot like Peru. And this archaeological park here, and it shows this castleture that's right next to it, and some of the artwork that comes from there, and an idea that almost looks like a Spanish castle, if you will. But here's that hole, and again, that hole is a couple of feet off the ground. And above the dolmen hole that's on this opening to it here, there's 2 people holding hands, and they really are, they don't, one's not wearing a skirt or anything. They're not using iconography like going into a bathroom or anything like that. But this is meant to symbolize man and woman, or a union. And these rams, and people don't understand what that concept is and why would they have that. But it's kind of a master of beast concept. But also, I think what the iconography is, that this was made about the time of Aries, and we're looking at that. So why would they show Aquarius? Because now is the time of Aquarius, and people will make up all these farcical ideas maybe about what that really means now, but in truth and reality, I think that's a rebirth concept, and this whole deal about like inky and stuff that we go with, and a lot of others. So there may be best way to see that each one of these is rounded. and you can get a good look at that entrance stone that's here, and then with the shadow you can see that peg that's over there, and all these stones that are all different shapes here, that's just, you know, going out of their way. And a lot of people have said, you know, that's just to make you, to screw with your head. That's just so whenever you show up and you look at it, you'll be wowed. You'll be like, oh, wow. Okay, wow, and it worked. What's up with that bullshit? It would be so much easier to take even just one level of the intricacy out of this in each situation that you're going into. Short of making the flat on top, was just building to one or two rocks and multiple levels quite often like this here to end up making it look flat, is one step simpler than any of these that are locked in or something like that, of course, or this, of course. But why? To make it more lock-a-block. Everybody says to make it earthquake proof because there's a lot of earthquakes during that time, and I can see that. But that isn't all. I mean, and if that works, why would they have exactly stuff like this at Peru and other places that look a lot like this? In fact, in Peru they have this round circulature built, and I've showed that before in another video. So it kind of strange. Here's a close-up on that idea, and they're saying that they're not sure what this is. And I'm guessing the person on the left, whose hand is worn away, is the male, and the person on the right is a female, and her hand isn't worn away, but man, she's got some long arms and long fingers. Perhaps. It looks like the skull area, or the head area, is worn away, and they might have used to put something there that's like a little headdress or something where you would maybe know it was a female, and that's long gone, a long time away, whether it was made out of wood or something else or who knows what. But I think the iconography here is that it's the time of Aries. It just kind of starts to make sense, and then you have, you know, from Taurus, then you have Aries, then we went to Pisces. And so we're looking at the dating too, and 2400 BC is just, yeah, so yeah, Jesus was Pisces, Aries, it's coming into Aries definitely, yeah, that's it, yeah, in the time of those, and the Arians and the airy people and stuff, yeah, it's got a lot of connectives to do with it. Here's another look at the rounding off of it and the way that it looks. And so, you wonder what's this got to do with death or a tomb, or, you know, and woo, with death going on to it too. But I think this is not really necessarily a death sign. It's a sign of rebirth. You see some of those stones are all carved just intricately and all those things. And then you see something like this that looks like they took a big stone, made it fit exactly into there, and then unpurposely maybe threw it on the ground and shattered the thing in 3 pieces and yet stuck it back in there. Well, if it's so damn easy to make one of these stones, what are you doing? What's the deal? Here we have that dual ram symbology here at another point too, and so I think what we are looking at is a sign of rebirth, and these people that are astrologers going along with the season and the age of the great year and everything that have it figured out, and we're derived from that, so it just makes perfect sense. People don't want to give credit to people in ancient times. I've shown you astrology stuff that goes back well below this, and some runes they've shown in Yemen and so on that don't correlate to the people there, and Sabaeans, and some ancient artwork that shows, and it looks weird, like Proto-Greek almost. Pretty fancy too, but that comes later after this. Anyhow, let me know what you think down in the comments. Peace.